weird to be back,
It
on campus. I feel like it's so different than last year because now I know where everything is. First of all,
Speak for yourself.
okay, so you don't know where anything, but I feel
I know
like
where some stuff is.
you
I
know
know where
where
most things are,
but more than you did last year.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's weird to go back and be walking around. I still haven't been back to the cave yet.
Wasn't your backpack in there?
No.
Interesting.
What?
There was
Someone's backpack was in there.
Okay, well, it wasn't my backpack. Have you guys have been there?
Yes. We were
I'm
just
excited for our first meeting with the ARVR Club.
I think we've already had it. Haven't we?
Well,
I missed it too.
technically, this is kind of a meeting of ARVR Club. There are
Technically.
members. Technically.
there. Okay.
Well, if it's a meeting of ARVR Club, then we should kick it off.
How do we kick it off?
I'm glad you asked. Good after morning, and welcome to On the Dome, a podcast about how non-expert college-age youth think. First episode of the semester. So we're back. We're sophomores, and today we're going to talk about AR and VR, something I'm very interested in. I know you guys are very interested in. So you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Luca. I'm a sophomore here at MIT studying computation and cognition.
Heyo, I'm Lucas, also a sophomore, and I'm studying electrical engineering and computer science.
Yes, and I'm Mahak. For listeners, I am the host. I'm a sophomore at MIT. I'm from Seattle, and I'm studying electrical engineering and computer science. But yeah, so we are all in AR/VR club together. So
Yes.
let's start though with what AR/VR is, because I feel like this is a anagram? Not an anagram. It's a. This is something we're going to be saying a lot. AR/VR.
It really is. Well, we
Yeah.
can say XR. There are a million terms,
MR?
whatever. MR, mixed reality. XR is extended reality, which is kind of just encompassing everything.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so let's define it. I actually Googled some definitions and I probably forgot them. But essentially, augmented reality is overlaying digital, information into the real world. That can be visual, that can be auditory. Maybe in the future that'll be smell as well, other senses, and using often headsets or glasses to do that. And virtual reality is full-on immersion. So essentially, taking your field of view often and replacing it with a digital reality. How did you guys get interested in this? I'm curious.
Okay, so I got a VR headset in junior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
After trying out one from a friend. I got the original Oculus Rift, and it was kind of cool. I played Robo Recall. It's one of those
Mm-hmm.
shooter kind of hit 'em up kind of games, and it was fun or whatever. And then I put it down, and then I didn't play it for 2 years, and then COVID happened, and then I was stuck at home in quarantine. I was taking a gap year, so I was stuck at home for a whole year. And then I was I want to go outside, but I don't really want to go outside. So I should probably get back into this, virtual reality kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then I kind of got obsessed with it. Yeah.
You decided to touch some virtual grass?
Yeah. Touched all the grass virtually.
How did you get interested in this?
Well, watching YouTube. It was probably 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade for me. And I kept seeing VR on YouTube, and it just looked so cool. And one day I just decided, all right, I'm gonna make it happen. And so I put a 1060 mini in my mom's work computer, and I.
What's a 1060 mini?
GTX 1060 mini. It's it's a graphics card, but it's
Okay.
the very, very minimum graphics card that you can possibly use to run virtual reality. And even then, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
And so this was desktop virtual reality.
Desktop, yeah, because there wasn't. I don't even think the Oculus Quest was out at that time. I'm not sure about that.
What year?
I don't know. I
That'll
have
do
no
it.
memory. But seventh or eighth grade, you can do the math.
I don't think it was out by then. Definitely.
Yeah, no, because I was using the Lenovo Explorer, which is like the Windows mixed reality.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the cheapest stuff I could get, basically.
The
And
bare minimum.
the very bare minimum to be in virtual reality, and it was so cool when it worked. But it only worked like half the time, and so
Right.
I was always like tinkering with it and like, you know, messing around in the settings and stuff like that. But I kind of just stayed interested in it, and then eventually I got a Quest 2 and started doing that stuff and got it wireless, and then now I'm here.
And now you're here. I feel like I should have gotten interested in AR and VR a lot earlier. I actually had a chance to try the Oculus Quest early because my dad worked at Facebook at the time, which was Facebook at the time.
Right.
But I actually didn't really get into it until I came to MIT. So I knew kind of throughout high school I wanted to do computer science. I was kind of interested in human-computer interaction, a little bit of graphics maybe. And then I came here and I somehow found the AR/VR like club page, and it sort of was just like, oh, I feel like I'd be really interested in this. And then I remembered back to, you know, being in VR for the first time, which for me, I remember trying the Quest, and I think the thing that I tried was they had this 360 video, and it was of Iceland, and basically it was taking you through all these different, like, places in Iceland, and you could, like, look around and be in the scene, and I just remember thinking that it was so cool. But I really like the immersive aspect of it. You know, like, creating a whole new, like, experience for people and all sorts of ways. But so both of you kind of got into it through gaming?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Would you say that you guys are gamers?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
I feel like a lot of people get into VR and AR through gaming.
It's like where the best content is currently.
Right. And I also feel like, at least from my perspective, because I will be the first to say I'm not exactly a gamer. Not quite. I've just downloaded the Summer Clash Royale on my phone.
Royale, that's a big one. Yeah.
And I'm very bad at it. I think I'm in like Arena 5 or something, and I've been playing for a few months, but I'm not a gamer. But I have noticed, I feel like a lot of new technology sometimes will first be adopted by gamers. And I feel like we're seeing that again in AR and VR. What do you guys think about that? Do you think like it's a good thing ultimately, or
I think it's something new. It's some new way to, like, you know, stimulate people's imaginations and entertain them, and that's what VR does.
I think it's also like definitely like when these kind of new technologies come out and they're like in the early adopter phase, and so the only people who can get it are the people who have, you know, the cash to spare, or, you know, the people who, you know, hack something together. Like the only people who are going to spend that time or money is like if there's something they're really interested in or passionate about. So like if you're gonna, you know, go out of your way to make an unnecessary purchase or spend time doing something, it's usually going to be for the purpose of like something that you find really fun.
Right, yeah. Gamers it's an interesting thing because it's this giant demographic of sort of very specific people where the whole community is based around, in a lot of ways, technology. But sort of in a recreational way where you, like, gamers would actually spend, I don't know how many 100 hours completing a video game or, like, playing through it, so they're actually, like, getting that much, you know, use out of VR or AR, which right now is a little bit very expensive. But I don't know, do you think that, I feel like, at least we've had many conversations in AR and VR Club about how, you know, we think the future of AR and VR is going to be, but I don't know, when do you think we're going to start seeing that shift of, like, from AR and VR being, like, gamers only to being something for everybody?
January of next year.
Are you going to make it happen?
Nope.
Who's
I think that whenever Apple releases their mixed reality headset that, you know, they've been working on and there've been rumors about for like an extremely long time, whenever that gets released, I think that's going to be like a major signal to kind of the industry and I guess just people in general that like it's something that exists now, more so than like the niche thing that it really is right now.
Yeah, it still feels like a technology of the future instead of like a technology that like we can use now. It's kind of cool, but Lucas, what do you think?
I think it really requires there to be a space for people to exist in like a non-gaming context.
Right.
And so right now I think there are things that are considered VR games that don't necessarily have to be a game. So like social VR apps, like VR chat and that kind of thing. Like I see them more parallel to like social media, like 2D social media, as opposed to like a game. Even though it's within the community it's really considered a game because it's it runs in a game engine, you have an avatar, you have to create assets and stuff like that. And I think from an outside perspective it very much appears to be a game, right?
I feel like VR and AR are going to redefine what like a game is, because I think eventually I feel like it's just going to become the new way we interact with the world. I personally feel like AR and VR as like a daily part of our lives is inevitable eventually, but I don't know when. Do you guys feel that way? Like it's definitely going to happen?
Oh, they're looking at me. Eventually. I mean, I think money's just being pumped into it, right? That will lead to innovation and that'll make things better. And I mean, like right now there are a lot of problems and things like, preventing, I guess, mass adoption, right? I think those problems will be solved. I think a lot of people tend to focus on like the future aspect of virtual reality and augmented whatever. And that kind of leads the people who are like making things and like developing for these platforms to make things that are useful in the future, or making their ideas, like their dreams for like some far off thing, to try and make that a reality. And I think the people sometimes forget to make things for now. And I think until that kind of a shift happens, then we're not going to move forward.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's been some success in that with like phone AR. I feel like that's sort of that's going to be the sort of stepping stone. I can think of, the obvious example, which is Pokemon Go, but also like Snapchat, the filters, is augmented reality. I don't know. I feel like it's definitely hard to avoid the whole like futuristic, if anyone's read Ready Player One, or like even like The Matrix, it's hard to avoid all of that futuristic sort of thing, but I feel like eventually it's just going to become the next sort of phone type of thing. But the interesting thing is we can kind of like, at this point, I feel like you can sort of see the timeline in the next 10, 15 years, because all these companies are, as you said, pouring so much money into it. It's interesting to think, already, the digital world is kind of controlled by companies. Now, taking that into virtual reality and augmented reality, are you guys like, let's actually, instead of going down the sort of dystopia, companies ruling the metaverse sort of world, what would your ideal view of the sort of virtual reality, augmented reality worlds be? Would it be like more creator driven or independent companies, or like what are you really excited about in sort of the potential of it all?
So I think for me, I guess the big thing is just like every single new like big breakthrough in technology that affects everyone is typically something that brings people closer together over like longer distances, right? So like the phone, like going from a phone to a smartphone, and then you have social media, and now everybody knows about everyone at all times. Like I could see there being a really big like societal implication of like, like I might live 500 miles away from someone, but I can still spend time with them as if they were sitting on my couch. I could film a podcast with people very far away as if I was actually there with them. And I think that's going to be a big shift.
Eventually this podcast will be us in VR on the actual dome. Yes. But until then,
Not
what are
today.
you excited about? Like, what are you hyped about? What like idea? What makes you want to like start gesturing with your hands and talking really loudly?
Well, it's not the metaverse, I'll tell you that. It's just, I mean, I don't really care about what some billionaire thinks is going to be the future. I just want to see the technology get better. I want to see more support for the people currently making things, because like it's pretty hard to develop in VR, right? And that's games but content of all kinds, right?
Right.
And so most of the content that gets made, like at least at this point, is community content. It's just people making things.
Right.
And it's hard.
Blender is not easy.
And so I'm excited for, like, it's great when the community is making things and they're really like, oh, you know, in charge of their destiny, whatever. But I think it really is, it's holding the industry back in a lot of ways, you know?
What is?
If the community is self-sustaining fully, and the community makes all its own content, then there isn't a need for developers to get paid, which doesn't, like, and I'm not saying no one wants like the next AAA title, right? Nobody wants the next game, because like we all do. But I'm worried that people are going to get complacent, and that might kind of stagnate the industry, you know?
Yeah, I think that what I understood of what you're saying is I feel like there's two paths. There's like the path where it's like all like indie and, you know, people making content for the people and, you know, like the whole community aspect of things. But the hard part of that is then it gets sort of limited, especially what can happen sometimes, speaking as a non-gamer, is like a lot of the content can be focused on gamers, which is statistically a more narrow demographic. And, you know, as that technology is getting built, if it's built for a narrow demographic, it gets harder to then broaden it and make it really for everybody, make it inclusive, often make it accessible in terms of, like, for example, for people with disabilities. So there's sort of that aspect where you can have this really awesome, you know, by the people, for the people, but then you lose out on the, you know, really able to help a lot of people, sort of more general technology. And then with the general technology, obviously, then it gets, to do that, you need companies, you need billions of dollars, and then you have all of their control. Yeah. So it's really hard to, I feel like, navigate that.
It's got to be like some combination of both.
Right.
So that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about progress.
Yeah. I think that at this point, at least from where I'm sitting, I feel like the companies are starting to get into it, which is, I think, still pretty exciting. But that, I guess, means that us, whether we're working for those companies or as independent developers, have to make sure we're pulling in the other direction. So
yeah, it's a balancing act.
It's a balancing act. We have to hold up our end of the tightrope.
Exactly.
But do you think that? Well, actually, this is a good segue into one of the people who's doing this, an independent developer of VR technology. Lucas, do you want to talk a little bit about your cool gloves? Your cool glove idea?
Sure, yeah. So I am working on a project. I've been doing it for the past 2 years, almost, for basically homemade VR haptic gloves for super cheap. So basically the idea is there are already VR haptic gloves out there. They've been featured on, like, the idea has been on Ready Player One and lots of literature, but then also just like they exist, but they're really expensive.
Right.
And what they do is they let you see your hands, use your hands in VR, and when you grab objects, you can actually feel virtual objects in some capacity. But they're kind of like prohibitively expensive for anyone in the community who isn't on the company side of things.
Right.
And so the idea for the project is you can build a pair of gloves for about like $60 in parts right now. And so it makes it a lot easier for just like VR, random VR people, VR enthusiasts. So like people who are, really, really interested in VR from a community perspective, to actually get their hands on the gloves.
Get their hands on the gloves, yeah. So you designed these gloves and then essentially made the whole project open source, so that anyone can build it, which is really exciting. Do you think that, how much of a future do you see for, like, do you want to see more people trying to, you know, hack their own VR things? Or is your ultimate, like, are you going more on the route of let's make it open source so that, you know, companies will then have to make their gloves more accessible? Or do you think that there's more of a future for the fully, like, DIY stuff? Kind of get where I'm going with the question.
I think I do. I think so companies have, like when you're talking, like, on the market of, like, real, you know, VR devices and just in general devices you can buy, there's limitations to, like, breadth and depth. So, like a company will, you know, make something that does some conventional things but very well, right? And so right now for VR and interaction, that's controllers. Like, controllers have been made for a long time. They've been, you know, all the way from the console gaming era, right? And so there's still a ton of inspiration in consoles, like console, you know, like an Xbox controller, you know, a Nintendo controller, in VR controllers. It's just they're tracked is the biggest difference, and you have one per hand. And so these kind of, like, open source community projects don't have to play by the rules because they're not risking, you know, like, losing a bunch of money or their investors running away and stuff like that. And so when you have that, that's where you get the kind of, like, golden age renaissance kind of, like, you know, community developments, like, especially like in the beginning of VR, when the VR software, like VR game development, was like that, like back in, like, the Oculus, like, DK1 eras, where you had, like, you know, content creators like Jacksepticeye making, like, you know, all these videos and, like, crazy, you know, wacky experiences that weren't polished or perfect in any way, but then you could actually explore every possible combination.
So, like, I think it's interesting that it's, sometimes I feel like it always has to be the next generation, or the, you know, it can't be the companies maybe that are, like, always going really outside the box, because they have the box of, you know, we're making billions of dollars and we'd like to keep doing that. But it's cool to be sort of on the side of, at least at the time that we're in, I feel like the field's wide open. So, you know, it can kind of go anywhere, which is very exciting. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of different, you know, ways that VR and AR could come into, you know, daily life. I'm sure, you know, lots of books have talked about the different ideas for all of it. But I think I'm really excited about mainly augmented reality. I think it could be just so cool to, like, actually integrate technology into daily life. I don't know. Do you guys have a preference? AR, VR, both, neither? Probably not neither.
Well, I think from, you know, the gaming perspective, virtual reality has a lot more possibilities and capabilities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess from a gaming perspective, like, virtual reality is more, like, analogous to, like, a big screen game.
Right.
So, like, something you would play, like, on a TV, whereas, like, augmented reality is maybe more analogous to, like, more casual, like phone, like, mobile games, for example.
Yeah.
Like, you could play those, like, on a desk, you know, in an augmented reality, like Angry Birds, like, whereas, like, a VR thing is, like, really meant to immerse you completely, right?
Right. It's also, at this point, obviously both VR and AR headsets are expensive, but at this point, at least, VR headsets, I feel like, are a lot less expensive than AR headsets. Obviously, phone AR is pretty accessible, but yeah, AR headsets are very expensive right now. And actually, it's interesting because I feel like some companies are then taking that and deciding to market their AR headsets now to enterprise. So meaning, like, they're trying to market it to companies because they can actually pay for it. Do you think that that'll affect how people see AR and VR, you know, over the next maybe 10 years?
I think that enterprise and, you know, corporate solutions are great. I think that I think that it'll push it forward, you know? It's like computers used to be spreadsheet machines.
They did.
And now we play games on them. I think that it'll at least make it less of a future technology and more of a real thing that exists.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it can grow from there. And I think putting the cart before the horse is not necessarily a good idea. So, yeah, I definitely agree with like what the AR headset companies like Magic Leap. Like, I think they're probably doing the right thing.
I think so too. It's just it's so expensive. So just for a reference point, and these numbers are very ballpark, I'm not saying exactly. I believe like the Magic Leap and HoloLens are between $2,000 and $3,000, or like $2,500 and $3,500, which is real expensive. And the other thing that makes it hard to market that towards, I feel like, consumers is that if it's so expensive, then a developer, to develop on it, you have to go get one, first of all. So that's a big, monetary investment. And then you have to, build this game, which, as we said, developing for VR and AR is not easy right now.
Right.
And then you have to expect all of the people that you want to play your game to then go buy this $3,000 thing, plus whatever cost your game is not a very attractive field to get into as of yet. But I think some of the manufacturing and like other like enterprise sort of like solutions or fields are really I'm sorry, I'm not dying, I'm fine. But I feel like some of them are really interesting, like the idea of working in a factory and being able to use AR for like helping complex assembly tasks. I know that Magic Leap is also doing stuff with doctors, so working on like they can visualize the different arteries before surgery. That's very cool. But I think it's really interesting, definitely, to be able to interact in different ways. One thing that I'm really fascinated by, actually, is that it's sort of adding a new dimension. Well, literally, it's adding a new dimension to experiences. But, you're going from 2D and then obviously the dimension of time to now sort of 4D, because 3 dimensions plus the dimension of time. And I think that might have also a lot of implications for accessibility. I know that you've worked a little bit in sort of the medical side of things. Do you want to talk about sort of what you did this summer?
Yeah, so this summer I worked in a research lab that was trying to restore movement and sensation to paraplegic people. Mm-hmm. I really can't get into all too much of what I did, but...
Do you want to talk about the work that sort of got you into this, that you did over the school year?
Over the school year, I had a couple projects. My first one is I wanted to make a haptic solution, kind of like what Lucas has done, but much more extreme, I would say. So the idea was using a TENS machine. And if you don't know what that is, it's like electrical stimulation, to basically shock your muscles into contracting when you want to stop a motion. Like, for example, if there's a virtual wall in front of you and you are reaching out to touch it, you can contract the muscles in your arm to work against you moving your arm forward, which effectively stops you at that virtual wall. Now, obviously, you feel it, so it's not perfect, but it was a fun project to work on.
Yeah, I have a lot of videos on my phone of us testing it, and just various of us just essentially getting electrocuted and being like, yeah, that one hurt more. Change the dial a little bit. No, that one hurt less a little bit. Okay. But I tried it, actually, and it's very cool. Like, your hand, for the audio-only listeners, I'm holding my hand out. Your hand will jerk back when it's detecting you hitting that virtual wall. It's uncomfortable, but it's very interesting. Yeah. And that kind of ties into one of the things I'm interested in, which is accessibility. I think that, with something like the gloves or with something like that, it sort of kind of ties into when you're adding more senses into a digital experience, you can thus inherently make things more accessible for people with different sensory disabilities. So like you could think of like people with visual impairments, people who are hard of hearing, or people who are deaf. Obviously, some of the technology has overlap with different, medical fields. So it's really interesting. It kind of feels like, I say this a lot, but, being in VR Club kind of feels like being in Computer Science Club in the 80s. Just so many options. What's your favorite thing about being in VR Club, actually? Let me ask you that.
Does the cave count?
Join VR Club.
For our listeners who are in MIT, VR Club applications are open. For our listeners who aren't in MIT, email us. But, the cave, do you want to tell us about the cave?
Sure. So the cave is basically the room that the VR Club lives in.
The room
it's
where it happens.
kind of like the room where it happens. It's like a lounge mixed with a hacky student-run lab where we do work on UROPs and stuff like that. We do these kind of hacky projects, trying to make VR things. Louder? Okay. Trying to make, make different VR projects, doing, helping with research and UROPs, and then also just hanging out and vibing and, enjoying the current state of VR as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a community. It's really fun, too, to just every week just talk about where we think, things are going, or, oh, this company did that, or, oh, look at this cool project. It's very much a collaborative space. What's your favorite part about it? And now you can't say the cave.
About the club?
Yeah.
Well, it's the people. It's having people to talk to about the things I'm interested in,
Mm-hmm.
That's
Speak
it.
on that. Elaborate.
Well, we're talking about it right now. Think about that.
Yes, this is very meta, isn't it?
Yeah, this is it. Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what Lucas said, and I think this is probably to his point, is it's good to we can, we're all, following the news and stuff surrounding the industry, and we're learning, and we're growing, and we're having fun together.
Mm-hmm. It's an exciting, definitely field to be in, but I think also it's cool to be, definitely at a place like MIT, where you actually have access to things that, I don't know, it feels like we're going to be the ones to, change the space. Maybe not us three specifically, but hopefully us three specifically. But it feels like at this time, and with, the resources and the people, being with people who are interested in it, it's really cool to be able to just dive into it and, see where it's going. It's definitely, have any of your expectations changed? Because, maybe we learned about VR 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? Have any of your expectations for it, changed over that time?
For what specifically?
For, how the field is going to sort of go. When you first, tried VR, did you think this is going to be a big thing in my lifetime? Or did you think this is 100 years out?
Ooh, okay. So I think going from initially trying VR, and, I guess my first real VR headset was the Oculus, the first Oculus Rift, but before that I had a Google Cardboard, for years before that.
So for our listeners, a Google Cardboard, Google came out with this very, very basic VR headset that the advertising feature was, it was made out of cardboard. You could take it and basically fold and assemble it yourself, which is very cool.
But I think from that to seeing all of the really cool videos on YouTube of the current state of where the furthest point of VR was. I always thought the progression would be VR would be trying to make all sacrifices to get as immersive as possible, basically.
Right.
Throw in more senses, add smell, add taste, add touch, bigger fields of view, and bigger headsets that can do more things. And it seems like the direction has kind of been the converse of that, which is trying to optimize everything that VR already was and is. So,
right.
Take the current screens that are already there and make them better. Higher resolution. Try to make them lighter. Basically, what can you do to make VR get to more people, basically? Which,
right.
in hindsight, makes a lot more sense. miniaturization and all this stuff, and now we're looking at the new next gen headsets that are going to be supposedly significantly lighter than they already are, and that's going to help a lot of people.
Definitely. Pressure headaches are a real thing, and I feel like also VR can get a little bit nauseating sometimes, so it's really cool to see sort of those optimizations happen. And bringing it back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, it's sort of that same path of general versus niche, big companies making it for everybody versus small communities making it very specialized.
Yeah, I mean obviously that's a generalization, and that doesn't cover everything.
Mm-hmm.
There was recent, I guess now somewhat recent, controversy from VR chat,
mm-hmm.
because what they did is make easy anti-cheat, which is basically it prevents people from modding their game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were community-made mods that made accessibility for people with speech impairments and people
right.
who were maybe disabled and couldn't stand up properly, and all of those community mods that had become essential for those people got wiped out when
mm-hmm.
that happened. So it can swing the other way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that definitely as this space is being created, it's going to be interesting to see how different people, I think the developers' sort of perspectives on what VR can be are really going to be very influential at this point. If they think it's, for everyone, because sometimes communities can, that specialization can help with accessibility, and sometimes more general stuff can help with accessibility. And it's sort of that way for, all of these different little issues. So it's all about, companies working together with community. Maybe. Or maybe it'll be something else entirely.
Yeah, accessibility definitely,
mm-hmm.
I feel swings both ways as far as,
right.
New technologies. Especially, so VR gloves, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They help with accessibility in the sense that, for hearing impaired people or speech impaired people, it helps a lot. It could in the future potentially help with sign language, right? Help
mm-hmm.
communication in that way. And there's a lot of people actually who have been asking to be able to use the gloves for sign language. But then on the other side of accessibility, there's what about people who don't have 5 working fingers on their hands,
mm-hmm.
or even for the muscle stimulation thing, that might help you bring more information to people if they're missing other senses. But what if their muscles don't function properly?
Mm-hmm.
Then
or
that's
if
not
they have
an
nerve
option.
impairments or stuff like that. It's very, it's hard sometimes to conceptualize how, obviously different people have different needs, right? But it's interesting to just think about all the different ways that, you could say all the different ways that it could go wrong, but all the different ways that it could go right, all of the different ways that these different approaches to technology could theoretically help people. And that is very, very exciting. Are you excited?
I'm excited.
Are you excited?
Very.
I am also very excited. And let's end this podcast being very excited about VR. So, thank you so much for listening. And this has been On the Dome. And that's the podcast. That's how we do it.
Okay, that was the practice run.